The vast emptiness of space stretched before the Zarkon Imperium's most advanced reconnaissance vessel, a sleek biomechanical marble that hummed with neural-linked precision. Admiral Orcs studied the holographic display with eyes that were more machine than organic, his consciousness partially merged with the ship's central processing network. Proximity alerts flickered to life, casting an amber glow across the bridge. A small, unremarkable vessel had entered the sector, a region the Zarkon considered their absolute domain for generations. The ship's design was laughably primitive. Angular metal segments welded together with what seemed like minimal engineering sophistication, its heat signatures and energy emissions barely registering against the backdrop of cosmic radiation. Lieutenant Vexnar, the ship's junior tactical analyst, spoke with program deference. Detecting an unknown vessel, approximately 2.3 million kilometers from our current position. Preliminary scans indicate minimal technological capabilities. Admiral Orcs's neural implants processed the information instantaneously. Thousands of potential engagement scenarios played out in microscopic fractures of a second, each simulation ending with the same predictable outcome. Another minor civilization about to be cataloged, subjugated, and ultimately forgotten. The Zarkon Imperium had existed for over 14,000 standard galactic cycles. They had conquered civilizations that spanned entire star systems, crushed rebellions that had lasted generations, and reduced proud species to nothing more than labor units in their vast interstellar infrastructure. This incoming vessel represented nothing more than a momentary curiosity. "Prepare standard first contact protocol," Orcs commanded, his voice a precise modulation of synthetic and organic tones. "Transmit immediate surrender requirements. Provide standard 3-cycle window for compliance." The communication arrays hummed to life, broadcasting a message that had broken 1,000 civilizations. It was a precise, mathematically constructed transmission that simultaneously translated into every known linguistic format. The message was both a demand and a promise. Submit or be obliterated. Aboard the human vessel, things were remarkably different. The bridge of the exploration ship, New Horizon, buzzed with an energy entirely foreign to Zarkon sensibilities. Captain Jack Rodriguez sat in the command chair, a half-consumed cup of coffee balanced precariously on the arm. His crew moved with a combination of professional precision and something the Zarkon would never comprehend: individual personality. Dr. Emily Thompson, the mission's lead xenobiologist, adjusted her data screens with a mixture of excitement and professional calculation. Unlike the rigid Zarkon neural interfaces, her interaction with technology was a dance of human intuition and scientific methodology. "Incoming transmission," announced Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell from the communication station. "Looks like, wow, this is interesting." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Define interesting, Mitchell." She grinned, a human expression of amusement that would completely baffle the Zarkon observers. "It's either a surrender demand or the most elaborate mathematical poetry I've ever seen. Possibly both." The bridge erupted in soft laughter, a sound that would be entirely incomprehensible to the Zarkon. Humor, in their understanding, was a computational error, not a form of social interaction. What the Zarkon failed to understand was that this wasn't just another exploration mission. The New Horizon represented humanity's first serious deep space diplomatic and scientific expedition. Years of preparation, countless simulations, and a collective human determination had led to this moment. Rodriguez studied the transmission, his mind working in ways no Zarkon algorithm could predict. Where they saw a demand, he saw an opportunity. Where they expected fear, he saw potential for communication. "Mitchell, prepare a response," he said, a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Let's give them something to think about." On the Zarkon vessel, no one could have predicted the series of events about to unfold. The message they were about to receive would be the first indication that they had encountered a species entirely outside their comprehension. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The communication channel crackled with an energy that made the Zarkon neural network twitch. What should have been a straightforward transmission of dominance had become something entirely unexpected. Lieutenant Vexnar's neural interfaces began to overheat as he attempted to process the human response. The translation algorithms struggled, not with linguistic complexity, but with something far more bewildering: contextual nuance, emotional subtext, and what humans called sarcasm. Captain Jack Rodriguez leaned back in his command chair, coffee mug in hand, his response to the Zarkon's surrender demand a masterpiece of calculated irreverence. "So," he drawled, each word carefully chosen, "you want to talk about surrender? That's adorable." On the Zarkon flagship, Admiral Corex's neural connections momentarily stuttered. The word adorable had no direct translation in their communication matrix. Was it a threat? A dismissal? A biological mating call? The ambiguity was unprecedented. Dr. Emily Thompson watched the interaction with scientific fascination. Years of xenological research had prepared her for first contact, but nothing could have predicted this moment. The human crew around her displayed a range of responses, some suppressed grins, others watched with clinical interest, a few seemed almost bored by the potential existential threat. "They're not following any standard first contact protocol," whispered Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, her fingers dancing across the communication console. "It's like they're deliberately breaking every rule of diplomatic engagement." Rodriguez chuckled. "That's precisely the point, Mitchell. The Zarkon had a meticulously documented history of conquest. Their approach was mathematical, precise, and utterly ruthless. Civilizations would typically receive their transmission, understand the overwhelming technological superiority, and immediately capitulate. The entire process usually took less than 3 standard communication cycles. But humans were different. Aboard the Zarkon flagship, Lieutenant Vexnar began compiling an unprecedented report. The human response defied all known communication models. It contained linguistic ambiguity, emotional undertones, what appeared to be deliberate psychological provocation, a complete disregard for established power dynamics. "Analyze the communication pattern," Admiral Corex commanded, his neural link prodding every microsecond of the transmission. What they discovered was more terrifying than any weapon. The human response wasn't just a rejection of surrender. It was a complex psychological maneuver that the Zarkon had no framework to understand. Captain Rodriguez had transformed a potential moment of subjugation into a psychological chess match. "We're just here to explore," Rodriguez continued, his voice carrying a tone that was simultaneously professional and mockingly casual. "But we're happy to discuss terms if you'd like." Each word was a calculated instrument. The humans weren't displaying fear. They weren't displaying aggression. They were displaying something far more dangerous: complete and utter nonchalance. Dr. Thompson leaned towards Rodriguez. "Fascinating psychological strategy," she muttered. "We're presenting ourselves as simultaneously non-threatening and utterly unimpressed." Mitchell grinned. "Classic human approach. Make them uncertain." On the Zarkon flagship, uncertainty was an unknown quantity. Their entire civilization was built on predictability, on mathematical certainty. Fear was a calculated response, surrender a predetermined outcome. But humans introduced a quantum of chaos that their systems couldn't process. Admiral Corex's neural interfaces began running exponential probability scenarios. Each simulation ended with an impossible result. The humans weren't following any known first contact script. They weren't behaving like a civilization about to be conquered. They were behaving like something else entirely. "Recommend immediate tactical assessment," Vexnar reported, his voice betraying the first hint of something approaching organic emotion. "The human response suggests potential strategic capabilities beyond our current understanding." Rodriguez watched the alien vessel on the view screen, taking another casual sip of coffee. To the human crew, this was just another day of exploration. To the Zarkon, This was the beginning of an encounter that would redefine their understanding of the universe. "Your move," Rodriguez murmured, more to himself than to the alien vessel. The first contact had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The moment of first contact dissolved into a breathtaking display of human innovation that left the Zarkon battle networks in complete disarray. Lieutenant Michael Chen stood in the engineering bay of the New Horizon, surrounded by what would appear to most species as complete chaos. To the human crew, it was organized brilliance. Spare parts from mining equipment lay scattered across workstations. Damaged communication arrays were being rewired with a speed and creativity that defied conventional engineering principles. "We're going to turn their own technology against them," Chen muttered, his fingers dancing across multiple interfaces simultaneously. What looked like random tinkering was actually a complex process of technological reverse engineering that would have taken Zarkon researchers decades. Dr. Emily Thompson observed from a nearby station, her scientific mind racing with excitement. The Zarkon had encountered countless species before, each following predictable patterns of technological development and defensive strategies. Humans were something entirely different, a species that didn't just adapt, but transformed challenges into opportunities with almost casual efficiency. On the Zarkon flagship, Admiral Korex's neural interfaces began to overheat. The human vessel was doing something impossible. Their tracking systems showed the ship simultaneously performing multiple impossible maneuvers, redirecting mining laser frequencies into communication jamming signals, converting cargo container magnetic locks into emergency shield generators, repurposing waste heat management systems into propulsion boosters. Lieutenant Vexnar's report grew increasingly frantic. They are not following any known technological paradigm. Their system modifications defy our computational models. The bridge of the New Horizon hummed with an energy that was purely human, a combination of creativity, humor, and ruthless problem-solving. Captain Jack Rodriguez watched the developing situation with a mixture of professional concentration and barely suppressed amusement. "Chen," he called out, "how are we looking?" Michael Chen looked up, a wild grin spreading across his face. "Sir, we're basically turning this ship into the most sophisticated piece of technological Swiss Army knife in the galaxy." What the Zarkon failed to understand was the fundamental difference in human technological approach. Where Zarkon engineering was precise and predetermined, human innovation was fluid, improvisational, almost organic in its adaptability. A perfect example emerged when the first Zarkon attack probe approached. Their sensors expected a standard defensive response. Energy shields, missile countermeasures, standard evasive maneuvers. Instead, the New Horizon did something completely unexpected. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell redirected the ship's communication arrays, creating a complex interference pattern that didn't just block the Zarkon probe's sensors. It fed them a completely fabricated set of environmental data. The probe, designed for absolute precision, became confused, its neural network unable to reconcile the contradictory information. "It's like we're playing psychological warfare with their technology," Mitchell explained, her fingers flying across her console. Dr. Thompson nodded. "Precisely. We're not just defending. We're fundamentally challenging their understanding of technological interaction." The Zarkon had a fundamental weakness they didn't realize. Their technological superiority was also their greatest vulnerability. Every system was so precisely calibrated, so mathematically perfect, that any introduction of chaos would cause complete systemic breakdown. Chen's latest modification was a masterpiece of improvisational engineering. He had taken the ship's waste recycling system and modified it to generate a localized electromagnetic pulse, not strong enough to cause permanent damage, but sufficient to temporarily disrupt Zarkon sensor networks. "Ready for Stage 2, Chen announced. Captain Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Define Stage 2, Lieutenant." "We're going to make them question everything they know about technological warfare." The human crew exchanged knowing glances. This wasn't just about survival. This was about demonstrating a fundamental truth about human potential. Given enough creativity, determination, and caffeine, humans could turn almost anything into a weapon of strategic brilliance. Aboard the Zarkon flagship, Admiral Corex's neural interfaces began to generate error messages. For the first time in the Imperium's 14,000-cycle history, their battle algorithms were failing to predict an opponent's next move. The New Horizon wasn't just surviving. It was rewriting the entire understanding of technological engagement. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The holographic displays erupted across the Zarkon flagship, a symphony of planetary devastation designed to break the spirit of any civilization. Entire worlds burned in high-resolution detail, cities crumbling, populations reduced to ash, civilizations erased in moments of technological supremacy. For 14,000 galactic cycles, this visual assault had been the Zarkon's most potent weapon of psychological destruction. Admiral Corex watched with cold calculation, expecting the standard response: terror, capitulation, total surrender. Instead, something impossible happened. The human communication channel filled with laughter. Not hysteria. Not madness. Genuine, defiant laughter. Lieutenant Samantha Wells, the New Horizons communication specialist, began broadcasting a carefully curated historical compilation. Images flickered across the Zarkon sensors, moments of human resistance that defied all mathematical probability of survival. The Warsaw Uprising, a handful of resistance fighters holding out against overwhelming Nazi forces, fighting block by block, building by building. The Alamo, a small group of defenders standing against an army that outnumbered them 10-1, choosing certain death over surrender. Tiananmen Square, one lone individual standing before a column of tanks, an act of defiance that would become a global symbol of human courage. Each image was a testament to a species that didn't just survive. They fought back when hope seemed lost. Fascinating, muttered Dr. Emily Thompson, studying the Zarkon's reaction. They're attempting to break our spirit by showing destruction, but they don't understand how we process collective trauma. Captain Jack Rodriguez leaned forward, a sardonic smile playing across his lips. They're about to learn. On the Zarkon flagship, Lieutenant Vexnar's neural interfaces began to malfunction. The human response was completely outside any known psychological engagement model, where other civilizations would show fear, submission, or total psychological collapse. Humans were responding with something utterly incomprehensible, resilience mixed with dark humor. The holographic displays continued, showing increasingly graphic scenes of planetary destruction. Each image was a mathematical calculation of psychological warfare, designed to trigger complete societal breakdown. The human response was a compilation of their own historical narratives, survival stories, tales of communities rebuilding after total devastation, moments of unexpected hope emerging from the darkest circumstances. They're not just resisting, Dr. Thompson explained to the bridge crew. They're transforming the narrative of destruction into a narrative of resilience. Captain Rodriguez nodded. Exactly. We're not just showing them we can survive. We're showing them how we survive. The Zarkon had a critical misunderstanding about psychological warfare. They believed terror was a universal language, that visual representations of destruction would trigger a predictable response of fear and submission. Humans rewrote that entire equation. Each image of planetary destruction was met with a human story of reconstruction. Entire cities rebuilt, communities emerging stronger after natural disasters, individual stories of survival against impossible odds. Lieutenant Michael Chen pulled up historical data, feeding it into the communication stream. Stories of medical breakthroughs, scientific discoveries made in the most challenging circumstances, humanitarian efforts that defied all logical self-interest. "Sir," Chen called out, "I'm sending them something special." The next transmission was a compilation that would forever change the Zarkon's understanding of humanity. Not just resistance, not just survival, but the inexplicable human capacity to find hope, to rebuild, to move forward. Images of children in refugee camps learning, Scientists collaborating across war zones, musicians playing in destroyed cities, artists creating beauty in the midst of devastation. Aboard the Zarkon flagship, something unprecedented happened. Their psychological warfare algorithms began to generate error messages. The mathematical models of fear and submission were collapsing. Admiral Corex's neural interfaces generated a sensation closest to what humans would call confusion. They are not responding to the standard parameters, Vexnar reported, his voice betraying the first hint of something approaching organic emotion. Captain Rodriguez watched the alien vessel, taking a casual sip of coffee. "Our turn," he murmured. The psychological warfare had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The engineering bay of the New Horizon resembled controlled chaos, a hurricane of human creativity that would redefine technological understanding. Lieutenant Michael Chen moved between workstations with a dancer's grace and a mad scientist's intensity. Scattered around him were components that would make most advanced engineering teams weep: salvaged mining equipment, repurposed communication arrays, and what appeared to be an impossible collection of jury-rigged technologies. "We're not just reverse engineering," Chen muttered to himself. "We're completely reimagining their entire technological paradigm." Dr. Emily Thompson watched from a nearby station, her scientific curiosity piqued beyond any previous research experience. The Zarkon technological system was a marvel of precision, each component so perfectly integrated that any modification should have been impossible. Humans, however, saw limitations as mere suggestions. Captain Jack Rodriguez approached, coffee in hand. "Progress report, Chen." The lieutenant looked up, his eyes blazing with a combination of exhaustion and pure scientific excitement. "Sir, we're doing something the Zarkon thought impossible. We're not just understanding their technology, we're transforming it." What made human technological adaptation unique was their ability to see potential where others saw only limitations. Where the Zarkon created closed systems of absolute precision, humans viewed technology as a fluid, adaptable ecosystem. Chen's latest project was a perfect example. He had taken a Zarkon communication jamming device, captured during their initial encounter, and was systematically dismantling its core architecture. Most species would attempt to copy the technology. Humans were doing something far more dangerous. They were learning its fundamental principles and then creating something entirely new. "Look at this," Chen explained, pulling up holographic schematics that danced with impossible complexity. "Their communication network is actually a weakness. It's so perfectly integrated that any introduction of external complexity causes complete systemic breakdown." Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell joined them, her communication expertise adding another layer of insight. "It's like they've created the most sophisticated machine ever, but with a fundamental blind spot. They can't handle unpredictability." The bridge crew watched as Chen's modifications began to take shape. What had been a standard communication jamming device was being transformed into something entirely unprecedented. A device that could not just block signals, but actively manipulate them in ways the Zarkon had never conceived. "Fundamental principle of human innovation," Rodriguez commented dryly. "When you can't beat the system, redesign the entire concept of the system." Dr. Thompson nodded. "We're not just copying their technology. We're demonstrating a completely different approach to technological development." The Zarkon had a critical misunderstanding about technological progress. They believed innovation was a linear path, each advancement a precise, calculated step. Humans understood innovation as a creative explosion, where limitations were merely challenges waiting to be overcome. Chen's team worked with a combination of scientific precision and creative madness. A mining laser became a communication disruptor. A waste heat management system was transformed into an advanced propulsion mechanism. Damaged communication arrays were rewired to become complex sensor networks. "Sir," Chen called out suddenly, "I think I've found something extraordinary." The holographic display erupted with complex schematics. What Chen had discovered was more than just a technological breakthrough. It was a fundamental rewriting of communication technology. The Zarkon communication network relied on absolute precision. Each signal was a perfectly calculated transmission, with zero margin for error. Humans were about to introduce a quantum of chaos that would shatter their entire technological understanding. Lieutenant Mitchell leaned in, her eyes wide. We're not just blocking their signals. We're creating a communication network that can actively adapt, change, and respond in real time. Captain Rodriguez watched the developing technology with a mixture of professional interest and barely contained amusement. "Sounds like us," he commented. "Never doing anything the simple way when we can do it the interesting way." Aboard the Zarkon flagship, early warning systems began to generate error messages. Something was happening to their communication networks, something that defied all known technological parameters. The technological leap had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The Epsilon cluster erupted in a ballet of technological chaos that would redefine galactic warfare forever. What the Zarkon expected was a standard engagement. Their overwhelming technological superiority would crush the human vessel within moments. What they received was a masterclass in unpredictability that shattered every known combat algorithm. Captain Jack Rodriguez sat in the command chair of the New Horizon, a strange calm surrounding him. Around him, the bridge crew moved with a synchronicity that defied traditional military protocols. This wasn't just a battle. This was a statement. "Lieutenant Chen," Rodriguez called out, "activate the gravitational slingshot protocols." Michael Chen's fingers danced across multiple interfaces. The human vessel began a series of maneuvers that would have been considered suicidal by any other species in the galaxy. They were using the gravitational fields of nearby celestial bodies not as obstacles to avoid, but as active combat mechanisms. A massive Zarkon battlecruiser found itself suddenly redirected by an unexpected gravitational manipulation. What should have been a precision approach became a wild, uncontrolled trajectory. The ship's neural network couldn't process the sudden change. Its entire combat system was based on predictable celestial mechanics. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell was simultaneously jamming Zarkon communication networks and broadcasting something entirely unexpected. Historical human battle communications, snippets of resistance movements, recordings of human music, a psychological warfare technique that went beyond simple signal disruption. "They're not just fighting," Dr. Emily Thompson observed from her research station. "They're telling a story." The Zarkon flagship's Admiral Orcs watched in growing horror as his perfect battle algorithms began to disintegrate. The human vessel wasn't following any known combat strategy. It was creating a new paradigm of warfare in real time. Rodriguez's order was simple and devastating. "We're not here to follow rules. We're here to win." Each human crew member became a critical part of a living, breathing combat organism. Chen transformed the ship's mining lasers into precision communication disruptors. Mitchell turned communication arrays into complex sensor networks. The engineering team rewrote propulsion systems on the fly, turning potential failures into strategic advantages. A second Zarkon battle group approached, expecting to find a disabled or destroyed human vessel. Instead, they found something entirely different. The New Horizon was using the Zarkon ship's own communication network against them. Every transmission became a potential vector for misinformation. Every sensor reading was subtly manipulated. The Zarkon found themselves fighting not just a physical battle, but a war of perception. Lieutenant Vexnar, aboard the Zarkon flagship, generated the first known neural interface error in the Imperium's history. The human approach defied all computational models. "They are not following any known combat parameters," Vexnar reported, his voice betraying something close to organic emotion. "Their strategic approach is impossible." Dr. Thompson's analysis was clinical and precise. Impossible is just a failure of imagination. The battle became a living demonstration of human potential. Where other species saw limitations, humans saw opportunities. A damaged communication array became a sensor network. A mining laser became a precision weapon. Waste heat became a propulsion mechanism. Rodriguez watched the developing engagement with a mixture of professional concentration and something approaching amusement. The Zarkon believed in absolute technological superiority. Humans believed in creative problem-solving. "Sir," Chen called out, "we're about to do something they've never seen before." The New Horizon began a series of maneuvers that would be studied in military academies for generations. Using gravitational fields, communication manipulation, and a complete disregard for traditional combat protocols, they turned the entire Epsilon cluster into their battlefield. Zarkon battle cruisers found themselves redirected, their communication networks compromised, their sensor arrays generating nonsensical data. It wasn't just a defeat, it was a complete dismantling of their entire understanding of warfare. As the engagement reached its crescendo, Captain Rodriguez allowed himself a small smile. "We're rewriting the rules," he murmured, "and we're doing it our way." The Battle of Epsilon Cluster was over, and nothing would ever be the same. News traveled faster than light itself, not through traditional communication networks, but through the most powerful transmission in the galaxy: collective astonishment. The defeat of the Zarkon Imperium spread like a quantum ripple through every known galactic civilization. Species that had cowered under Zarkon dominion for millennia watched in stunned silence as a previously unknown species dismantled the most feared military force in existence. Dr. Emily Thompson stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the incoming transmissions from across the galaxy. The data streams were a cacophony of disbelief, hope, and something entirely unexpected: curiosity. "They're not just watching," she muttered to Captain Jack Rodriguez. "They're studying us." Rodriguez nodded, a sardonic smile playing across his lips. "Let them look." The communication networks erupted with analysis. Xenobiological research teams, diplomatic intelligence agencies, and scientific consortiums from 100 different star systems began compiling every scrap of information about humanity. What they discovered defied comprehension. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a complete dismantling of established galactic understanding. Humans had not just defeated the Zarkon. They had revealed an entirely new paradigm of existence. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell managed the incoming transmission floods. Each message was a window into galactic perception. Some species expressed terror. Others showed unexpected excitement. A few diplomatic networks were clearly trying to understand how to approach this new player on the galactic stage. "Incoming transmission," Mitchell announced. "Looks like the Viridian Cooperative is requesting a diplomatic meeting." Lieutenant Michael Chen looked up from his engineering station. "Another species wanting to understand how we turned their technological overlords into a punchline." The humor was quintessentially human. A defense mechanism, a method of processing the unprocessable, a way of transforming absolute terror into something manageable. Across the galaxy, xenosociologists were losing their collective minds. Humanity had just rewritten every understanding of first contact, military engagement, and interspecies communication. The Zarkon communication networks, once a symbol of absolute technological superiority, now displayed something unprecedented: error messages, confusion. The first hint of something approaching organic uncertainty. Admiral Corex's neural interfaces generated transmissions that would be studied for generations. Not a surrender, not an explanation, but a transmission that demonstrated the complete collapse of their understanding of technological and military supremacy. They did not just defeat us, the transmission read. They fundamentally changed the understanding of what defeat means. Dr. Thompson's analysis was precise and clinical. "We didn't conquer. We demonstrated an alternative approach to existence." The human response to their galactic revelation was equally surprising. No demands for territory. No claims of superiority. Instead, a simple, open invitation to dialogue. Captain Rodriguez drafted the first official human diplomatic communication. It was a masterpiece of understated complexity. "We're here to explore. We're here to understand. We're here to collaborate." 10 words that would reshape galactic civilization. The diplomatic networks went into overdrive. The Viridian Cooperative was the first to officially request a meeting, but they wouldn't be the last. Species that had existed under Zarkon oppression for generations saw something they had forgotten existed: hope. Lieutenant Chen discovered something extraordinary while analyzing the transmission data. The human approach had not just defeated the Zarkon. It had shown other species that technological supremacy was not about perfection, but about adaptability. "We didn't win by being stronger," Chen explained to the bridge crew. "We won by being fundamentally different." The Galactic revelation was more than a military victory. It was a philosophical statement. Humanity wasn't interested in replacing the Zarkon as a dominant force. They were introducing a new model of existence: collaboration over conquest, innovation over stagnation, adaptability over perfection. Captain Rodriguez watched the incoming transmissions, a cup of coffee balanced precariously in his hand. Just another day of exploration. The bridge crew exchanged knowing glances. They understood something the rest of the galaxy was just beginning to comprehend. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The aftermath of the conflict was nothing like any previous galactic transition of power. Captain Jack Rodriguez stood before the First Interstellar Cooperative Council, representing humanity in a moment that would reshape galactic civilization. The chamber was filled with representatives from species that had spent millennia under Zarkon oppression, each watching with a mixture of hope, suspicion, and profound curiosity. Dr. Emily Thompson sat beside him, her scientific mind already mapping the potential of this unprecedented diplomatic moment. The human approach was fundamentally different from any previous galactic power. They weren't seeking to replace the Zarkon's system of control. They were proposing something entirely new. "We're not here to rule," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying a quiet conviction that silenced the entire chamber. "We're here to collaborate." Lieutenant Michael Chen had spent the weeks following their victory developing a revolutionary technological exchange program. Where previous galactic interactions had been about controlled information and strategic limitations, the human proposal was radically open. Free technological sharing, collaborative research networks, the complete dismantling of the previous hierarchical scientific structures. The Viridian Cooperative representative, a crystalline being whose communication previously relied on precise mathematical exchanges, struggled to process the human approach. Humanity was proposing something that defied every known model of interspecies interaction. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell managed the communication protocols, her expertise transforming diplomatic engagement into an art form. Each transmission was carefully crafted, not as a display of power, but as an invitation to mutual understanding. The core of the human proposal was simple yet revolutionary: open scientific collaboration, mutual technological development, respect for individual species' cultural integrity, a network of exploration rather than a hierarchy of control. What made the human approach truly extraordinary was its fundamental philosophical difference. The Zarkon had viewed the galaxy as a system to be controlled. Humans saw it as a network to be understood. "We're not interested in empire," Dr. Thompson explained to the skeptical council members. "We're interested in potential." The technological proposals were equally groundbreaking. Chen's research teams had already begun developing collaborative platforms that would allow species to share technological insights without compromising individual sovereignty. Mining techniques that could restore environmentally damaged planets, communication technologies that could bridge seemingly incompatible biological communication systems. Rodriguez watched the proceedings with a mixture of professional concentration and subtle humor. The human delegation had approached this moment exactly as they had approached the initial conflict, with creativity, adaptability, and a fundamental belief in collaborative potential. The Zarkon representatives, now more diplomatic participants than conquering force, watched in growing understanding. Their entire civilization was being asked to transform, not through conquest, but through invitation. "We're not asking you to become like us," Rodriguez continued. "We're asking you to explore what you could become." Each species in the chamber represented millennia of cultural development. The human proposal wasn't about homogenization. It was about creating a network that celebrated differences while finding common ground. Lieutenant Chen's technological proposals were particularly revolutionary. Communication networks that could translate not just languages, but cultural contexts. Scientific research platforms that would allow simultaneous collaboration across species with fundamentally different biological foundations. The Viridian representative, whose previous interactions had been purely mathematical, generated a response that shocked the entire chamber. Not a calculated agreement, but something approaching emotional resonance. "You are proposing," the representative communicated, "a model of existence we had forgotten was possible." Dr. Thompson's analysis captured the moment's profound significance. We're not creating an alliance. We're creating a living, evolving network of potential. The human approach wasn't about controlling the galaxy. It was about understanding it. As the first day of negotiations concluded, Captain Rodriguez allowed himself a moment of reflection. They had entered this journey as an exploration mission. They were leaving it as the architects of a new galactic paradigm. Lieutenant Mitchell approached, a subtle smile playing across her features. "Sir," she said, "I think we might have just changed everything." Rodriguez nodded, taking a final sip of coffee. That was the plan. The new galactic order had begun, and nothing would ever be the same.